It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.
Good evening, everybody. You're watching America First. My name is Nicholas J. Fuentes. We got a great show for you tonight. Very excited to be back here with you tonight on Wednesday. We have a lot to talk about tonight, lots to get into. Big show. Tonight, we're going to be talking all about the wars in Gaza and Ukraine, which I'm actually glad to do. Last night, we talked a little bit about a lot of this like Republican infighting, the Gavin Wax thing, Paul Ingracia's nomination, and I said last night it was a very important show, but to be honest with you, that kind of thing is boring. It bores me. And so tonight we're going to be doing a very important show, big show. We're going to be talking all about the major wars that are going on. Our featured story, we're talking about the state of the Gaza ceasefire. It's not good. And it looks like it might be on the brink of collapse. There's a number of developments we're going to discuss in connection with that. Among them, that there have been no fewer than 80 violations of the ceasefire by Israel since it went into effect last week. 80 violations. And we talked a lot about the ceasefire last week and the week before that. We talked about this 20-point plan. And if you recall, although there was all this hype and big international trips and meetings and fanfare, broad agreement apparently between Muslim Arab countries, Israel, the United States. In spite of all this, there is very little that was actually agreed upon by the two parties, almost nothing actually. And although there's 20 points, they're only implementing a couple of them. And even the implementation of these 2 or 3 points, there's no details, there's no timeline. And so I said from the very beginning, if the deal is short on details, if there's not an agreement in principle on any of the longer term or major points, it's not going to last very long. And it's going to be more like a temporary ceasefire than anything like a comprehensive peace or peace agreement. And now here we are. Among those few points that were actually agreed upon, much of it, there is no agreement, not in principle, not in writing. Among the couple of points that are actually being implemented are that the fighting stops. But the fighting hasn't stopped. Israel accuses Hamas of attacking the IDF. Hamas accuses Israel of bombing Gaza repeatedly, like I said, up to 80 times. So even the few things that have actually been agreed to are not being implemented. And so this past week, J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, they all flew to Israel. And they flew there. They didn't say this, but this is what everybody understood it to mean. They flew there to make sure that Israel is actually going to abide by the deal. It was a form of soft pressure on the Israeli government. And they had to do that because they recognized that the Netanyahu regime might pull out at any moment. So we'll talk about all that. We'll talk about the state of the deal. We'll talk about some of these major developments that have taken place since the agreement went into effect. We'll give you an overview. It almost collapsed altogether this weekend. The Israelis said that Hamas attacked them 3 times in a coordinated way in a single day, and then they came in hard and bombed everybody that was near those attacks. The whole thing almost came crumbling down just a couple of days ago. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the rest of it. We're also going to talk tonight about the state of the Ukraine war. Same deal, man. Same exact situation. There was supposed to be a high-level meeting this week, first between the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and Russia's Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov. And that was supposed to be the prelude to another summit between Trump and Putin in Budapest, in Hungary. And that was supposed to happen this week. They canceled it. They canceled both. So there was no meeting between the foreign ministers. There was no meeting between the heads of state. And actually, the opposite has happened. Trump has put sanctions on Russia's energy companies, their oil companies. And apparently, although it's not 100% confirmed, According to the Financial Times, Trump has reauthorized Ukraine to use long-range missiles and strike deep inside Russian territory. So Ukraine is now bombing Russia again. There are more sanctions against Russia even than there were under the Biden administration, and the meeting is off. So it looks like the war is going to keep going for the foreseeable future. Golden Age. The Golden Age is here, we're told. So we'll talk about that too. Should be a pretty good show. I have to say, this administration, it's not going well. I don't know how people are coping with this. And it seems a little trite to say it. Here we are 8 months in, and I've been saying it since day one. But when are we actually getting anything that was promised here? Across the board, and it looks like not only are the staples, the core promises not being delivered on, like the war in Ukraine is going on, the war in Gaza might come back, but there's actually new problems that weren't even in contention. You might say these are secondary problems. They're now talking about regime change in Venezuela. So the foreign policy is in the toilet, the whole thing. No peace in Russia. The Gaza ceasefire gave Trump a little bump in the polls, and I think there's a lot of optimism about it, but very risky, very shaky ground there. And then there's a third war that we didn't even anticipate that's about to pop off, regime change in South America. So we'll talk about that. Well, not Venezuela. We'll talk about the rest of it. Should be a big show. Before we get into it, I want to remind you to smash the follow button on Rumble, smash the like button, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the show. Remember to check out our store, Fuentes.store, to get your hats. Order them now in time for the holiday season. This month has flown by. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like it was just summer, and now it's winter. It's getting cold out here. It's like 50 degrees in Chicago. I felt like just yesterday it was 100 degrees here. And now it's already November. It's already Halloween, Thanksgiving. So get the hats. We also have a brand new shirt on the store. We have a new flag. And people are loving both of them. They love the flag. It's the Know Nothings flag. Beware of foreign influence. Very cool. I love the flag. And we have a brand new shirt, White Ass Niggas Going Hard as Fuck. Check that out. That's Fuentes.store. Subscribe to the website, AmericaFirst.plus. If you're a super fan of the show, become a plus subscriber. AmericaFirst.plus, $100 a month. You get access to a group chat with me. And I was in the group chat all day today. I was sending voice memos. I'm basically like doing a show in the group chat, because I leave these like 30-minute voice notes, and I'm just talking about Tim Pool, Tucker Carlson. I'm talking about all the inside stuff, and I'm giving you bonus content. That's the $100 a month club. If you are poor, you can subscribe for $15 a month and get access to the entire archive of the show, every episode I've ever done, going all the way back to 2017. It's like 5,000 hours of content. So check it out, AmericaFirst.plus. What else is going on? I am back. I know I haven't been doing the show a lot past couple weeks, but I'll be here the rest of the week. I'll be here all throughout next week. So the show is fully back. I hope you're excited about that. The other thing I wanted to talk about just briefly, and I want to be very intentional, and I want to choose my words carefully here, because look, I don't want to get my ass kicked. I don't want to get punched in the face. I don't want to get beat up. So I want to be careful about how I choose my words and what I'm about to say. Did you guys see Tucker Carlson's appearance at Turning Point USA yesterday? And I watched it, and it was pretty good. He didn't do a speech. He just gave a question and answer session. He debated some of the students. But there was one clip from the appearance that really stood out to me. There was this frat bro type guy, a total Chad. He's in like a Nike tech suit and seemed like a real bro. And the guy comes up to the microphone during the question and answer with Tucker, Huge audience, by the way, 3,500 people, massive event, huge audience, really impressive. So this frat bro comes up to the microphone and he says, you know what, Tucker? He goes, it feels like things don't change. We elected Trump, but we're still at war in Ukraine. They can't end the war in Gaza. They're doing regime change in Venezuela. He goes, your dad is in the CIA. He said it just like that. He said, so why does it feel like nothing ever changes? It seems like the deep state always wins. The wars go on. Nothing actually changes. What is it going to take for things to change? I don't know. That seems like a reasonable question. That's true. All of it is true. The war in Ukraine is going on. The war in Gaza might resume at any time. And we know even if it doesn't, the war in Iran is about to break out again. War in Venezuela is ongoing. And it is true. It's just a fact. Tucker's dad is in the CIA. It's just true. Okay, we all know that now. Now we all know that. And Tucker replies to the question, and he says, I agree with a lot of what you just said. He said, but if you bring up my dad again, I'll kick your ass. I mean it. Seriously, don't test me, son. And I saw this clip and I'm like, whoa, what's with the reaction? That's crazy. He goes, my father was a good man, whatever his job was. I don't think anybody said otherwise. I didn't hear that. And I saw that clip, and then I saw another clip. There was like a left-wing student, and he was giving Tucker a hard time. But he said, you're worth $50 million. And Tucker said, hey, don't believe everything you read on the fucking internet. I'm not worth $50 million. Whoa, okay, sorry. Sorry, you're worth $25 million. My mistake, sorry. And, you know, look, I'm sure that Tucker's dad was a good man. I read Tucker's eulogy to his father. It was very beautiful. It was very touching. And I don't think that I've ever attacked Tucker's father. I don't think this student was attacking the father. What does it mean to attack somebody? Is it an attack to acknowledge a very powerful person's pedigree? Isn't that not relevant? Some people might say, no, it's not relevant. I disagree. I think it's very relevant. I think that who your parents are tells you a lot about who you are. And I think that certainly if you are somebody that is constantly critiquing the deep state and the wars and all these things, and you yourself applied for the CIA, I think that maybe becomes very relevant if you've got a background with that. If you come from that, I think that might be relevant. And so I saw these clips from the debate or the Q&A session, I guess you could call it, this Turning Point event. And I said, why is he so defensive about those things? I think those are fair questions, but I saw the reaction. And the first guy says, your dad's in the CIA. He goes, I'll kick your ass. It's like it's a college student. It's some like Chad frat bro. Whatever, dude. You know, and Tucker says, I'll kick your ass. The other guy says, you're worth a lot of money. Fuck you. Don't believe what you read on the internet. And I'm like, where is this coming from? And I'm going to be honest with you. One of my issues with Tucker, although I think both of us are generally pushing in a similar direction, we're both very opposed to war with Iran. I think we're both critical of the Trump administration. We probably agree on maybe 90% of things. But I think a valid critique is if you're going to engage in a structural critique of power, and by that, you could say a populist critique of the economic system, a political critique of the permanent bureaucratic state, if you're going to engage in that kind of structural critique of power, it just has to be acknowledged that you're from that world. In other words, if you're going to rail about the 1%, it's kind of relevant that you are the 1%. If you're going to rail against the deep state, it's kind of relevant that you are from the deep state. And I don't know why he's so allergic to acknowledging that. And there's sort of something actually disturbing about how it seems that there is this facade, which is flip-flops, dog, checkered shirt, navy blazer, and okay, I mean, maybe that's authentic, but there's a sort of deliberate attempt to say, I'm folksy, I'm plain spoken, I'm like you guys. But then when somebody says, well, to be fair, you're very rich and you come from that world, you come from a government family, you get this anger, this wild lashing out. How dare you acknowledge that? And then, oh, sorry. Oh, whoops, I got a little angry there. It's like, okay, I don't know. It's like those videos of like when they say a shapeshifter, their face changes and their reptilian form is revealed. I'm not saying he's a reptilian, but I don't know why he's not comfortable acknowledging those things. Because, and I'll tell you why specifically, I'm willing to believe that he's a class traitor, as it were. I might be more willing to believe that he's a good faith actor. And he says, you know what, look, I'm very rich. I come from a government family, but the system's corrupt. And the people are right. And like, okay, that I can get behind. That makes sense to me. I don't think it's insane to say that there are rich people and there might even be people from the government that become defectors. I don't think that's outside the question. But I think people start to get skeptical and cynical about it when it seems like there's some defensiveness or there's a lack of complete transparency. Later in the event, he said, I lived in D.C. my whole life. I come from a government family. And it's like, wait a second, so you can acknowledge it, but if someone else asks you, you're going to get punched in the face? I thought that was a little inappropriate. And a little confusing. I don't think that really gels with the rest of the image. So I saw that clip and I was a little bit taken aback by that. And you had to know that question was coming. If you're Tucker, and given, I'm sure he saw my video about him, I'm sure, he saw some of the scrutiny about that. He had to know that something like that was coming, whether in good faith or in bad faith, whether from the right or from the left. He had to know that something like that was coming his way if you're doing a public event where you open it up for questions. It seemed like he was unprepared for that, and there was this flash of anger, and I thought that was a little strange. And I'm not trying to concern troll or tone police. I'm not trying to be, insincere when I say that, but it was a bizarre interaction. So if you haven't seen it, go watch the clip. Little bit bizarre. The guy said, yeah, so it seems like nothing ever changes. Your dad's in the CIA. And he goes, I'll kick your ass. And I wish I could. I would come down there. He said, don't test me, son. Okay, like, what's that? What is that all about? That was a little weird. So some people are saying maybe we'll do a show together. Is he going to beat me up? Is he going to punch me in the face? Now I'm a little nervous. Am I going to get my ass kicked because I said that in my show? So I guess we'll see. But anyway, I saw that clip and a little bit bizarre. Let me know what you think. Obviously, I'm biased, and I'm biased because me and Tucker have had this feud, this kind of behind-the-scenes feud for a couple of years now. He's been saying bad things about me. I've been saying bad things about him. I don't think that's really outside of bounds to say that about his family. It's not like people are saying your dad is a jerk. People are saying, you come from a government family. That's what that is. That's fair. It's fair to say that Obama's dad was like a communist or whatever, It's fair to bring those things in my opinion. I think that's very relevant to that conversation. Maybe it was flippant, but I don't think it was derogatory. I don't think he said it in necessarily a pejorative way. So you tell me what you think if that was an inappropriate reaction. I saw some people say that was just a joke. It didn't come across like a joke to me, but maybe it was. Maybe it was and it didn't play well, but it didn't seem that way. Anyway, so that's that. But I do want to move on. I want to get into our big news for the night. We're going to talk all about Ukraine and Gaza. I guess we'll get into Gaza first. That's the one that everybody wants to hear about. And I think that's kind of the biggest news in the world right now. We've entered into a new phase of this Middle Eastern conflict where it seems, at least for now, that things are winding down and de-escalating. As you know, a couple of weeks ago, Trump announced with the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, a ceasefire to the war. It's a 20-point plan. It was endorsed by most of the Muslim and Arab countries in the world. It was agreed upon by both Israel and Hamas. And as I said before, the 20-point plan is light on details, which is a major flaw. It does not have a concrete timeline or any timeline. It does not have any specificity about a Palestinian state, which is the fundamental question which is at stake in the Israel-Palestine conflict. It does not have any specifics or details about the day after in Gaza. Who will rule Gaza? Who will govern Gaza? What does the future look like there? Very light on details. And what's more, the actual points that have been agreed upon by both parties, it's only a few of them. And these are the same points that were agreed upon in all the previous ceasefires which fell through. And by that I mean, throughout this 2-year conflict, there have been short-term truces. And they look like this. Hamas gives up some hostages. Israel might give up some of their prisoners. And they agree to stop fighting for a short period of time while they work out a longer-term deal. That has actually happened 3 or 4 times. It happened in November 2023. It happened in January 2025. And it happened now. It was close to happening in May of 2024. So at least 3, but maybe up to 4 times, there have been agreements about prisoner swaps, short-term truces, partial withdrawal of Israeli forces, but it never goes beyond that. And it never goes beyond that because there is no agreement in principle or in detail or in writing on any of the actual root causes of the conflict or the actual future of the Palestinian territories. And by that, I mean, Israel wants Hamas to be eradicated and to have no part in the future of Gaza's governance. What's more, Israel does not want Arabs or the Palestinian Authority or Hamas or really anybody. They don't want Qatar. They don't want Turkey. They really don't want anybody to have any role in administering the Gaza Strip. And so what's implied by that is that Israel wants to control the Gaza Strip. And that looks and sounds like annexation. If Israel is governing Gaza, if they control security, if they're administering the reconstruction, then that looks an awful lot like they're just effectively seizing the territory. On the other side, Hamas wants to continue existing. Hamas does not want to give up their weapons and disarm. They do not want to leave the territory, and they want to remain in some form, maybe by a different name, but they want to remain in some form part of Gaza. And in the future, they want an independent, autonomous, sovereign Palestinian state. So there is a fundamental disagreement on that. Israel wants Hamas destroyed. Hamas wants to exist. Israel wants to annex Gaza. Hamas wants Gaza to eventually form the base of a Palestinian state, along with the West Bank. And all the previous agreements, right up to and including this one, there's no agreement on any of that. All that there is an agreement about is that Hamas gives up the hostages, Israel gives up some prisoners, they stop fighting for a little while. And that is the state of the play right now. So everybody is watching and waiting to see if there will be some development of the deal. If, and specifically what they're looking for, is if Israel will honor the deal and if Hamas will disarm. They're looking to see if Israel will actually stop the fighting, if they've actually given up their ambitions in Gaza. They don't want to take the territory. They will respect the technocratic council that they're trying to build in Gaza. And they're waiting to see if Hamas will give up their weapons, lay down their arms, and leave the strip. And obviously, both are unwilling to do this. Hamas doesn't want to give up their guns because they think that if they do, Israel will reinvade. And Israel doesn't want to give up its ambitions because if they fully withdraw and if they don't want to control the strip, then Hamas will regroup or some other Palestinian faction will regroup and they will once again pose a threat to Israel. So people are watching to make sure that people on both sides abide by the current terms of the ceasefire, the points that they've agreed upon, and also they're looking to see if there's any actual buy-in and development that the deal will proceed beyond these few points into the rest of the deal, the rest of those points. And it's not looking good. So the major developments are these. Since the ceasefire has went into effect, Israel has repeatedly violated the deal. So again, there's 20 points and they're not even good, okay? The 20 points are vague, intentionally vague. The 20 points, even if they were agreed upon, there needs to be more negotiation on details and implementation, and you're probably going to need 20 more points. Like, the deal by itself is inadequate. They've only agreed to a few, and Israel won't even abide by the few points they've agreed on. You would think after the agreement, okay, Israel's going to stop bombing them, right? Israel's going to stop bombing them, and humanitarian aid is going to pour in, and the people of Gaza will stop starving and they'll get some relief. Neither of these things have happened. It's been 2 weeks, and Israel has violated the ceasefire 80 times. 80 times in 2 weeks. How is that even possible? They are bombing Gaza repeatedly. And what's more, Israel claims that Hamas is violating the deal. So in response to this, they have prevented humanitarian aid from getting into the Strip. So they've agreed on a couple of the points, and those are already out the window. There's no ceasefire. Israel's definitely violating it. There are claims that Hamas is violating it, which might be plausible. The humanitarian aid's not getting in. So out of your 2 or 3 points, we're like 0-3. And this is the story. This is from the news. It says, quote, 2 IDF soldiers were killed in clashes in the Rafah area of southern Gaza on Sunday, according to Israel's foreign ministry. The IDF claimed that terrorists fired an anti-tank missile as well as gunfire towards Israeli troops, accusing Hamas of violating the ceasefire. The Israeli military said it had carried out a series of strikes in response to the violations. In response to that, the Hamas government media office accused Israel of committing 21 violations on Sunday, bringing the total of alleged violations by Israel to 80 since the ceasefire began. Hamas alleged on Sunday that 97 Palestinians had been killed and over 230 had been injured as a result of the violations. So they violated it 80 times. There's 300 new casualties. How is that a ceasefire? Israel on Thursday accused Hamas of not complying with the ceasefire terms to return all the hostages from Gaza. While all of the live hostages have been returned, Israel is awaiting the handover of the bodies of the deceased hostages. Hamas has reported difficulty in locating the remaining bodies, with the group citing that it needs special equipment to retrieve those buried under the rubble, which sounds valid. So Hamas has no more hostages. There are no more living hostages. That is a moot point. They're not there anymore. Israel's waiting for Hamas to give up the bodies of the dead hostages, which are under the rubble of the buildings that Israel has destroyed. And for this reason, Israel is justifying more attacks. They're saying, well, you haven't given over all the bodies, so we get to keep attacking and stop humanitarian aid. Now, what's interesting about the claims of violations is that there's some details that are disputed here. There was a lot of coverage on Sunday that Hamas launched this coordinated attack on the IDF, that the IDF was being ambushed in a few different locations in Gaza. And in particular, there was this claim made that Hamas fired an anti-tank missile at the IDF and killed some of the soldiers. But there are alternative sources that say that actually Israel just stepped on unexploded ordnance. They stepped on a mine or some other unexploded ordnance that they had themselves dropped, and that is the source of the casualties. So in other words, Hamas did not renew the offensive on Israel in violation of the deal. Rather, this was a mistake. This was an accident. And by the way, the United Nations verifies there's tons of unexploded ordnance in Gaza. Israel has dropped so many bombs on Gaza, there are some that have not been detonated. There are a lot of bombs that have been dropped that have not exploded yet. And so when you go and clean up the strip, or you have Israeli personnel operating in the strip, these are things that will happen. That still poses a danger. That's a risk. So there's competing claims here. The IDF says they were shot at. Other sources say the IDF just was blown up accidentally by unexploded ordnance. Either way, they're using that to justify more airstrikes. They keep going. And this is the problem when you make a deal with the Israelis. What the Israelis actually are after, if you pay attention, not just to what's happening in Gaza, but all of these theaters, all the different fronts in the war, the Israelis are very clear about what they want. And what they want is complete freedom of action. What they want is to be able to violate a country's airspace, drop bombs on that country wherever, whenever they see fit, whoever they want to target, and they want to be free from retaliation. If you follow the conflict in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Iran, in the West Bank, it is very clear that that is what they are after. When they operate in Lebanon, they want, and they call this a doctrine, they call this a political or military reality, they want to be able to fly their jets over Beirut or over Dahia, the suburbs of Beirut where Hezbollah operates. They want to fly in southern Lebanon, and they want to bomb however many times and wherever and whenever and whoever they want. They want to do that in Syria. They want to bomb Damascus. They want to occupy southern Syria. They want to bomb the Popular Mobilization Force in Iraq. They want to blow up ports in Yemen. They want to be able to fly into Iran and make Iran like Syria, which is to say that they can bomb Iran whenever they want. They destroy their air defenses, their air force. They completely control the airspace, and they effectively have air superiority. They control the ladder of escalation, and they can do whatever they want to these countries. And that is their real vision for Gaza. This is why you can't make a deal with them. This is why you can't trust them. Because let's say the deal says, all right, the IDF ground forces will withdraw to a certain line. They're still in Gaza. They still control 50% of Gaza. They control all the border crossings. They control the entire perimeter of Gaza. Nothing gets in or out without the Israelis say so. So they're going to maintain complete security control. They've quarantined, or you could say blockaded the strip, but the ground forces are not operating. They don't have tanks and bulldozers and major ground offensives happening. And so people say maybe that's a suitable truce. That's a suitable cessation of hostilities. The Israelis have pulled back, relief is coming in, and the war has ended. But that is in no way, shape, or form what Israel actually wants. What Israel actually wants is to maintain something like a low level of conflict forever. They want to maintain a state of conflict, and this has been true throughout the history of Israel and its conflict with all of its neighbors. They're not at war, but they're also not at peace. They're not in full-fledged war, which means they have military objectives that are limited and strategic and time-sensitive, but they're also not at peace, where there's zero projectiles or zero hostilities. They like to do this, whether it's with Egypt or Syria or Iran or any of these non-state actors. They like to maintain a low level of conflict where there's not a complete peace, not a total war. And why is that? It is to maintain their freedom of action so that they can constantly go in and suppress the power of their neighbors or these other groups. That's the whole point. You might think, okay, they're going to pull back. They're going to release the hostages. Peace will blossom. But if there's actual peace, what is the next logical step for Palestine? It's very obvious. If there's an actual peace, if there's an actual peace agreement, an end to hostilities, then that means that Palestine can start to rearm. They can start to refortify. They're going to expect that Israel leaves completely and they have territorial integrity. And that means no occupying army, no violations of their airspace, no raids, no special forces. There's not a threat of reservists being called up and sent in on a moment's notice. And if that happens, that means that they can rebuild their infrastructure. It means that they could petition the United Nations for statehood. It means that they might organize with the Palestinian Authority or Saudi Arabia or Qatar or Iran for that matter, and they could start to build up a sovereign government, and then they could build a security force. They could start to rearm themselves. And that's the beginning of sovereignty. And that means if they have all these things, that Israel can't really do as much to them. Because if Palestine has territorial integrity and a security force, and they're rearmed, and they're at the UN, then there's something like a tripwire. And if Israel violates their airspace or violates their territory, then there's going to be political condemnation. Then there's going to be economic consequences. Then maybe Palestine will be able to defend itself. And that's not what Israel wants, because that would imply that Israel has to coexist with its neighbors, and Israeli influence will end where Palestinian sovereignty begins. And that's effectively the same problem for Israel in all of these different fronts. In Lebanon, in Syria, in Iran, in Yemen, Israel does not want peace, because the second that a permanent peace takes shape, then that means that Israel can't do whatever it wants. They can't take territory in Syria and make claims that they're defending the Druze. They can't do airstrikes in Beirut and claim that they're killing Hezbollah. They can't, at a moment's notice, deploy bulldozers in Gaza City and start destroying buildings again. And on and on and on with all these other countries. So Israel, it's actually their foreign policy that they want to be in a permanent state of war. And so much has been said about truces and ceasefires and peace agreements. These are words that matter in the UN. These are not words that matter on the ground. These are not words that matter to Israel. These are semantic games that are being played. A truce, a ceasefire, a peace, root causes. These are semantic games. The reality is that Israel is in a ceaseless state of low-level conflict with all of them, recognizes no borders, recognizes no sovereign airspace or sovereignty of a particular government, because their long-term objective is to keep all of these countries unstable, divided, off balance, because Israel's long-term plan is to expand as much as possible. They have their sights set on annexing Gaza and the West Bank. They have their sights set on annexing parts of Jordan, parts of Lebanon, parts of Syria, parts of Egypt. They have their sights set on regime change in Yemen, in Iran, in Iraq, in all these countries. They want to keep them permanently divided, off balance, militarily weak, politically ineffectual, because they have plans to someday, one day, on a timeline, confront and destroy in detail, systematically, all of these countries. That's their military doctrine. So it is a complete fool's errand to say, well, hey guys, we got them to agree to a ceasefire. They're pulling back to this line. They recognize no lines. You can draw lines around the map. They don't care. You can make them to agree to 50-point plans, 6 million point plans. They don't abide by them. They make things up. They claim there's violations where there aren't any. They don't negotiate in good faith. They lie. Their real agenda, like I said, is to constantly wage conflict against all of them so that all of these countries are in a state of stagnation. You can't attract investment. You can't stabilize politically. You can't unite a country and become strong if you're constantly being bombed. And that's the case with all of them. So Israel wants to keep all of them suppressed, weak, divided, ineffectual, while Israel grows stronger. While Israel attracts more investment, while they get more weapons from the United States, while they fight their battles systematically and take more land and fortify and consolidate their gains. That's the long-term arc of Israel. It always has been from 1948. And this is why, by the way, Israel's interests are completely hostile to America's. America thinks that if Israel could just behave itself, if we could just get Netanyahu to stop, then Israel's going to make agreements with Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the Emirates, and they're going to become a normal country like Germany, and they're not going to invade anybody, not going to fight anybody. They're just going to kind of keep the peace, and that's going to let us offload the security responsibilities to them and this broader alliance, and then we could go fight China. That's like the idea that we could still work with Israel. Israel's our ally. They're holding down the fort with the other countries. And if we could just constrain them with deals and investment and things like that, then they'll play nice and they're going to enhance stability in the region. But that is completely blind to the reality of Zionism, which is an expansionist ideology. They're like the communists. The Soviets were not content to build their socialist paradise in one country and leave everybody alone and say, hey, we're doing our thing, you do your thing, it's fine. No, they wanted to expand. They wanted to export their ideology. They had global ambitions. They wanted to confront all their adversaries. The same is true of Zionism. They have these long-term ambitions. They will never be a normal country. They will never normalize relations with anybody. They will always be expanding. So their interests are completely hostile to ours. And that is why it is America first, not to say, let's get Israel to sign up to a truce. Okay, they signed on the dotted line. We're good. Now we could do something else. They must be fundamentally confronted by the United States. And they must be effectively impaired. They must be made unable to do these things. And at the end of the day, the reason why that is extremely difficult, it's two things. Why can the United States never impair Israel, never really control them, never really restrain them in a systemic way? There's two reasons. Israel's control over our political system. If any American government tried to impose restrictions, tried to circumscribe Israel's freedom of action in the Middle East, there would be hell to pay from the Zionist lobby in America. We have elections every 4 years. The money's open, the media's open, the political system is open. So if you're Obama and you impose an Iranian nuclear deal on Israel, which is how they see it, they're going to be coming after Obama from Fox News, and they're going to be coming at Obama because of Citizens United. Sheldon Adelson will pour $100 million to the coffers of the Republicans. The Republican Jewish coalition, the Jewish lobby on the Democrat side, will come out in America against those types of policies. It's extraordinarily difficult to make that play with the powerful Jewish lobby domestically in America. That's one. Two is that Israel has a nuclear arsenal. So if the United States tells Israel, if you don't do what we say, we're cutting you off, Israel will literally take out the nuclear bombs for everybody to see. They will, and when I say that, I mean it in the most literal way possible. They will open up their nuclear facilities and they will display for all the satellites, all the eyes of the world to see their nuclear-capable missiles. And the implication will be, if you don't do it our way, we'll just nuke them. If you don't do it our way, we'll nuke our adversaries, and we may nuke you too. Maybe we'll nuke Europe. Maybe we'll nuke America. This is the problem. And I'm telling you, people say, why was I the only one that was right about war with Iran? Why was I the only one that was right about Israel's ambitions in the Gaza war outside of Gaza? It's because I'm the only one that understands, or maybe the only one that's honest, about what Israel's real foreign policy is. Their real ambitions, the real raison d'etre of Israel's government, which is Greater Israel. Israel exists because they want to have something like a Davidic kingdom that is at the center of global relations. That sounds insane, but that is what they believe. Contrary to people, some that founded Israel, some not all, they do not just want to have a normal country that happens to be Jewish among the other nations with normal relations. That is not what Zionism is about. Their ambitions have no limits. We have to get serious about confronting them. That's bad for America. A pariah state in the Middle East that is expansionist, that is aggressive, that is at war with all its neighbors, that does not respect international law, or more than that, does not respect American primacy, that makes them hostile to our interests. They're a destabilizing force. They're a future strategic competitor. They're a national security threat to America. They're also effectively then a rogue state with nuclear weapons. And America is not, they're not ready to hear this. The leadership, I think, maybe does not want to confront that reality because it's the reality that we are effectively bound at the hip to something like a North Korea. Israel is our North Korea. They're this nuclear country, but they're worse because they control our political system. They want to invade all their neighbors. And maybe they're more willing to use nukes than North Korea. It's like, it's terrifying. The level of blackmail they have over the entire planet. So anyway, maybe that's a rant that goes outside of the scope of the discussion about the ceasefire agreement. But it's important to understand this because if you understand this, you realize that you can get Netanyahu to make a phone call to Qatar because they say that that was the beginning of the peace process. Israel bombed Qatar. It infuriated the United States. Trump demanded that Netanyahu make this apology to Qatar. And everybody said, this demonstrates that America has gotten the better of Israel. We now control this relationship again because we got Netanyahu to say he's sorry. They'll say anything. They will say anything. They will sign anything. They will agree to anything. And people are drawing lines on maps and they're drafting 20-point plans and they're creating subcommittees for subcommittees, technocratic councils, call it whatever you want. We all know how this ends, which is that on some timeline, Israel's going to restart all of these wars, all of them. There is no peace between Israel and Iran. There is no peace between Israel and Gaza. There might not be a full-fledged war, but there certainly isn't a peace. There is only this state of perpetual low-boil hostility that at will and in an orchestrated and systematic way, they will increase or decrease according to their tactical and strategic priorities. That is their foreign policy. So now, in the midst of a potential collapse of the ceasefire, J.D. Vance and Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff have gone to Israel to put some diplomatic pressure on them. They're there to lean on Netanyahu, make sure he doesn't break the deal. This is the story on this. It says, quote, the administration of President Trump is growing worried that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu could jeopardize the Gaza ceasefire deal with Hamas. The New York Times, citing anonymous White House officials, said Vice President Vance's visit to Israel aims to put pressure on Netanyahu to abide by the ceasefire and, quote, add an extra symbolic layer to illustrate the administration's commitment to keeping the deal intact. Yeah, okay. I'm sure the Israelis are reading this and they're laughing. Netanyahu and Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, and they're reading this and they are laughing. I mean, read that again. Vance's visit to Israel aims to put pressure on Netanyahu to abide by the ceasefire and, quote, add a symbolic layer to illustrate the administration's commitment to keeping the deal intact. Symbolic layers to show how committed we are symbolically. Symbolically, commitments, illustrations. It's bullshit. Israel does whatever it wants. Fuck you. You're drawing lines on maps. All right, so the IDF is going to pull back here, and then they're going to go to the purple line and then the red line. And hey, we showed up. Hey, they put their hands on their hips. Hello, Mr. Prime Minister. I hope you're abiding by that deal. Oh, they're adding a symbolic layer of importance. They're showing him he means business. It's bullshit. They do whatever they want. They'll violate the deal 1,000 times. They'll kill 1,000 more people. And they'll say, hey, well, we're still in the deal. Until they're not. Until they feel like they're not again. The article goes on. It says, U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner already landed in Israel on Monday for talks with Netanyahu and other officials on the implementation of the deal. A senior U.S. official told the U.S. Daily that both Witkoff and Kushner believe the ceasefire deal is, quote, in danger of falling apart. The two envoys' strategy in Israel is to try to keep Netanyahu from resuming an all-out assault against Hamas. Israel launched a series of deadly airstrikes across the Gaza Strip on Sunday, killing at least 44 Palestinians after alleging that Hamas had attacked its troops in Rafah. The Palestinian group denied any involvement and reaffirmed its commitment to the ceasefire. Trump has already affirmed the Gaza ceasefire remains effective despite the Israeli strikes. So even though there's quite literally not a cessation of firing, even though no one has stopped firing, the ceasefire is still in place. Everybody's still shooting at each other, but I can assure you, we have a very real ceasefire. Now, here's how you understand what is happening. Israel is having a very difficult time on the ground in Gaza. There are two things that Israel excels at. They have a formidable and superior air force, and they have superior intelligence capabilities. Those are the things they're good at. So they can fly airstrikes. They could do sorties against Syria, Lebanon, Iran, Yemen, Gaza, and none of these countries have air defense systems or an air force that can combat, or that are not willing to, that can shoot down or fight Israel's air force. So Israel can drop a lot of ordnance. They could drop bombs really well. And Israel's Mossad and Shin Bet has infiltrated all these countries. So they can do, for example, the pager attack on Hezbollah. They can go inside Iran and launch missile and drone strikes from inside Iranian territory. They can do a cyber attack and disable their radar, their detection systems. Those are two things they do really well. They do not have an adequate ground force. And that's because they don't have a big population. It's a country of, 8 million people? So they don't have a huge standing army. They don't have a giant army like Turkey or like China or like Russia. And their ground forces are made up of reservists. Israel's a country where every citizen has to do involuntary military service. So when they go into Gaza, they're calling up something like the National Guard. They're calling up the reserves. And it's ordinary citizens that have regular jobs that they're calling up, okay, get your uniform, get your guns, and now it's time to go fight in Gaza. So when they go into Gaza on the ground, this is very difficult for them. It's not like they could drop bombs all day, and they could do things like the pager attack, and they could do things like cyber attacks. But when they actually have to go in on the ground, it's a whole different story because their forces have low morale, not very skilled. They don't really want to be there. They don't have a lot of them. And when they go into Gaza, they're encountering improvised explosives. They're encountering networks of tunnels underground. It's urban warfare. It's something like a counterinsurgency. So it's very difficult fighting combined with a not very good all-reserve ground force. So when Israel actually invades Gaza, this is extremely taxing on the country. Casualties are high, morale is low. Like I said, they're not a very strong force. The fighting is logistically difficult. And so the way that you look at this conquest of Gaza is that Israel likes to starve the Palestinians, bomb their infrastructure to make them weak. Starving you, depriving you of supplies. We're going to literally make you exhausted and weak, physically weak. And then they go in for a short time with these ground offensives in the urban areas. They go city by city. They've never controlled 100% of the Gaza Strip, very densely populated. And what it looks like is they're devouring Gaza in small bites over a long period of time. A lot of bombing, a lot of starvation. And then they'll go in these short spurts and they'll clear out a city. Then they go to the next city. Then they declare a ceasefire. We're all good. Take back some hostages, do more bombing, more starvation, get more weapons, refresh the reserves, get some reprieve. Then they go back in. That's really what this looks like. So why has Israel agreed to a ceasefire? It's pretty obvious. They agreed to a ceasefire because, one, it gives relief to their ground forces. They had this plan where they were going to send in the ground force to take all of Gaza. Then they revised that and said, you know what? We're only going to take Gaza City in the north, which they consider to be a big stronghold for Hamas. So they go into Gaza City, they clear many of the suburbs, and then bulldoze them. They're not just bringing in tanks, they're bringing in civilian construction equipment to literally bulldoze all the buildings. So they go in and they destroy everything, piece by piece, bite by bite, and then they declare a ceasefire. So they get some hostages, they refresh the ground forces, maybe they get more equipment from the United States. The other reason is that it takes some of the pressure off from the international community. Everybody's starting to hate Israel a little bit too much in America. At the United Nations, the pressure is increasing on Israel to recognize Palestine or to stall their offensive in Gaza. So it buys them some time with that as well. But they still ultimately have designs on the rest of Gaza. They're going to come back in. They're going to keep devouring Gaza piece by piece, bite by bite. They just want to buy themselves some time. Here's the other part of the story that, once again, nobody is talking about. At the end of the day, this is not really about Gaza. Gaza is a part of the much larger plan. Hamas is fundamentally seen as a proxy of Iran. And they're not the only one. It's also Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's also the Revolutionary Guard in Syria. It's the Popular Mobilization Force in Iraq. And it's the Houthis in Yemen. This war is not just about annexing Gaza and the West Bank, which involves clearing these territories, pushing the people out, destroying the infrastructure, making it impossible for the people to stay. It's also about creating a pretext to confront Iran directly and all of its other proxies. And so something else that Israel has been doing is that when it winds down the fighting, which is extremely intensive in Gaza, it then tends to wind up the fighting everywhere else. So last year, when Israel slowed down its offensive in Gaza, they reorganized their forces north and they began an all-out assault on Lebanon. And they went after Hezbollah with the pager attack. Then they bombed Hezbollah 1,000 times. Then they invaded Lebanon. And once that had been finished, then they went right back into Gaza. So they're not just taking Gaza piece by piece, bit by bit. They're also defeating all their other adversaries in the region in a systematic way, in detail. And the big element of this that no one is talking about is the state of diplomacy with Iran. Let's not forget that earlier in the year, Israel launched an all-out war on Iran, which they dragged the United States into to neutralize Iran's nuclear program. After the war, there was an effort by the Europeans and the United States to restart diplomacy with Iran, to get them to give up their nuclear weapons, or at the minimum, to get inspectors back into Iran's nuclear facilities. It was only a couple of weeks ago that Iran made it clear that that was off the table. It was just today that Iran's foreign minister said, we're not going to negotiate over our nuclear program anymore. What do you think the strategic calculus is in Israel? It's been 4 months since Israel and the United States went to war with Iran. Since that war, Iran has expelled all of the inspectors. They've turned off all the cameras in Iran's nuclear facilities. They've made it clear that Israel and the United States did not destroy all of their centrifuges, did not destroy their stockpile of enriched uranium. As a matter of fact, Iran says we're not even aware of all of their nuclear facilities and the extent of their nuclear program. They're also saying the inspectors are not coming back and that they have closed the door to any future negotiations. So what is the strategic thinking of Israel? If all of that has taken place, and it has been 4 months since Israel and the United States went to war with Iran, then the Israelis must assume that in this time period, Iran has been rearming themselves. They have continued enrichment of uranium. They have gotten more weapon systems from Russia, air defense systems, maybe Air Force. They're getting stronger. They're rooting out Mossad operatives that have infiltrated their country. And if Iran has gotten stronger, you would have to argue that Israel must assume that Iran is closer to a bomb now than they were 4 months ago in the immediate aftermath of the strikes. Then it's not hard to see where Israel is going to take the fight next, which is that we're overdue for another Israel-Iran war. And could that be the reason why Israel has stalled the fighting in Gaza? Temporary ceasefire so they could prepare to challenge Iran all over again? To me, those are the reasons that we have the ceasefire. And so, in other words, it is in America's interest to denuclearize Iran without toppling the government. That is technically America's strategic objective. Maybe that's not my idea of what our foreign policy should be, but that is logically, and that is what our government has promulgated, that is our strategic doctrine. Denuclearize Iran through diplomacy without toppling the government. And in Gaza, our objective is to end the war and make sure that Israel does not annex the territory, while also making sure that Hamas does not come back into power. That's our strategic objective. And so we are trying our best, America's trying our best, to make sure that Israel backs off of Iran and backs off of Gaza. And we're trying to get them to agree to hold themselves back. But if you understand Israel's strategic objectives, you understand that this is impossible. It's only a matter of time before one day they go back into Gaza, one day they go back into Iran. And the reason they have agreed tenuously to these peace agreements is because it's part of a broader strategic timeline, which is that eventually, once they've regrouped and reorganized, they're going to take the fight to another country. And then once they're done with that, they're going to go back into Gaza. And then the process will start all over again. They'll go back against Iran and they'll either finish the job, or they'll stop, get a ceasefire, and then go back into Gaza. And they'll either finish the job there, or they'll get another ceasefire, take the fight somewhere else, regroup. This has been the cycle for 2 years. In some ways, this has been the cycle for 70 years. This is how they operate. So I think it's really telling. It has not been 2 weeks since the deal came through, and Trump had this big ceremony with all the world leaders talking about a Nobel Prize, his triumph, front page of Time magazine on the cover, and the deal is already falling apart. It's just been 2 weeks, and the deal is already at risk of collapsing. They're sending over a high-powered delegation to oversee the implementation because everybody knows it's not going to hold. And what an embarrassment that'll be for this administration. And when the ceasefire collapses, I hope that proves once and for all for people that only read the headlines, who's really in control of this relationship here. If Trump is begging our own ally that we pay, please come to the table and make a deal, and they continually make an ass out of him by leading him on, signing on to deals they never intend to follow through with, it will be obvious that we have no control over this country. So that's that. But I do want to move on. I want to get into Russia. We're not going to have a ton.
Let's get right to it. So we're going to break this down into two parts. All right, we're going to break this down into two parts. The Israel fatigue is growing, man. The Israel fatigue is growing. The Donald Trump Israel fatigue is growing. This entire, both with Russia, Ukraine, but something about, I'll be totally honest, something about Israel and Palestine to me just seems different. Perhaps because Russia and Ukraine, maybe the way that it happened, maybe it's because I think that the Ukrainian army is a bit different than Hamas, a bit more legitimate. But this Israel-Palestine thing, it seems to be one of those things that keeps getting dangled in front of our face. We keep not believing what we're seeing. We don't necessarily know a lot of the history behind it. So the majority of Americans continue to just be fed these lies, be fed these things of propaganda without understanding, like, yo, we've been down this road before. So I wrote down a few notes and I tried to think of some things to talk about that are a bit different than things that we've discussed in the past, not just recycling everything that Nick said. But one of the things that actually came to mind is that what happens when other countries in that region, and really outside the region, but we'll start with in that region. What happens when all those countries start to look at Donald Trump making a fool of himself, pushing for these peace deals, begging Bibi Netanyahu in Israel for a ceasefire, then they violate it before he wakes up the next day. He throws a temper tantrum on TV. This seems to be a reoccurring theme. Perhaps now he's just not demonstrating his frustrations in public as he was in those instances. But this just seems to be a reoccurring thing. A reoccurring thing. Nobody believes that Donald Trump is going to bring about a ceasefire, if we're just being totally honest. So whether we're talking about Palestine, whether we're talking about Iran, like, what are we going to celebrate Donald Trump, having a ceasefire that finally stands when Gaza is 100% destroyed? You got Steve Witkoff and you have Jared Kushner doing 60-minute interviews where Steve Witkoff is saying for the last 2 years, they've been working on plans of what to do with Gaza. Oh, it's going to take some money from here, there. Oh, yeah, some of the European nations, they're going to throw some money in. Like, yo, you're literally making plans to build on land that Palestinians own after you already stole their homes and land to create Israel. And we're not supposed to think that this was already a long-term process. If you've been negotiating for 2 years, and maybe I'll include that clip here, but if you've been negotiating for 2 years, and in that clip, what's interesting about it is Steve Witkoff is saying this, like, yeah, we've been putting the plans together for 2 years. I think you guys would be impressed. Jared Kushner is sitting there looking at Steve Witkoff, whatever his name. My apology if I mispronounced it. He's looking at him and just saying like, pretty much wanting to say, like, bro, you're not supposed to say this. He's trying to jump in, doesn't know what to say. I'll leave that clip here.
But it's the master plan, and we're working with a group of people who have been working on master plans for the last 2 years.
So there are plans already.
Yeah. We have plans already. We have a master plan already. And by the way, and Jared's been pushing this, and we're working together on it. And I think if the world saw the progress so far, they'd be pretty impressed.
People are losing respect for Donald Trump. People are losing respect for America. And that can put us in a very dangerous situation. Now, when I say dangerous situation, I don't mean that any country in that region will be able to beat us in a war. But us going to war, that's a loss. And when I say that's a loss, that means that we are going to be sacrificing our young boys and girls, men and women, fighting for what? Fighting in a battle that has nothing to do with us. Because we allow ourselves to be used for leverage for Israel to bully people in that region. And now those people who may end up getting tired of being bullied. I mean, did we not learn from Osama bin Laden's manifesto? In Osama bin Laden's manifesto, he said very clearly that one of the reasons why they did what they did on 9/11 was because we keep supporting Israel and what they're doing in that region. Do we not think that somebody's going to jump out the window and do something again, whether it's to our troops that may be stationed outside of the country? Or what if now, because they're losing respect, now because they're losing perhaps a little bit of fear, they say, you know what, we're going to shoot our shot. Y'all are part of this as well. Y'all keep supporting the people bullying us. So now we're going to take a shot at y'all. What do we have to lose? You already destroyed our entire country. I don't like this. I don't like this. And it almost feels like either Trump is silly enough to actually believe that these ceasefires are actually going to happen and stand, because he just continues to march himself out there, beg for a Nobel Peace Prize, and really just make a fool of himself. Nobody believes that this ceasefire is going to stand, whether you look at it between Israel and Hamas, or if you look at it between Israel and Iran, or us and Iran. We already bombed their nuclear facility. And now I looked on ChatGPT just for a little bit of context as far as now what they're willing to do. And Nick mentioned this, you know, if they're willing to negotiate. Now I believe they kicked out all the people that were keeping track, you know, of their nuclear progress. Hold on one second. Let me, so now Iran, oh my God. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araki, stated that Iran will not return to negotiations as long as Washington makes unreasonable demands. These unreasonable demands seem to be very similar to Israel Palestine when we think about unreasonable demands. When you look at Israel breaking the ceasefire, claiming that Hamas broke the ceasefire, I believe it was, you know, they ran over a bomb or something like that, and they blamed Hamas. And everybody in that region, or a lot of people in that region, are saying like, yo, these bombs are on the ground, these explosives are on the ground, like they're gonna go off, perhaps, especially if you're trying to bulldoze the land, like that's what's gonna happen. And are you just gonna turn around and just use that as an opportunity to say they violated the ceasefire, now we can send a bunch of missiles their way and continue with our real estate project? That's what it seems like all this is primed to do. How can Hamas, let's be real, if Hamas is really the terrorist group that a lot of people are painting them out to be, do you think they're really going to give up their arms based on them losing respect for Donald Trump? Do you think they're going to believe Israel when Israel's willing to violate even what Donald Trump says in America and bully Donald Trump in America? Do you think that Hamas is willing to put down their arms when you have Qatar and Donald Trump has a good relationship with Qatar and America? They're supposed to be the negotiating party, the peacemakers, you know, the ones that bring both sides to the table. And you sent a bomb to try to attack Hamas leadership without letting America know that you're bombing our ally. And you think that people aren't losing respect for Donald Trump in that region, losing respect for America? Now let's look at if Hamas is not the terrorist organization, because even if they're not the terrorist organization that Zionists will want us to believe that they are, would you put down your guns? Like, would anybody put down their guns if you're looking around at what's happening? Would you feel safe? Like, could you imagine a more vulnerable position to be in? So all of this stuff, it just doesn't seem realistic. Now Iran, after they had their nuclear site bombed, who knows what was destroyed, what percentage, and now we'll never know because they kicked out a lot of the inspectors. Now, obviously, what is this setting up for? What is this setting up for? And it's so funny how we want to know everything about Iran's nuclear weapons and which stage they are in the process. But meanwhile, Israel, they're allowed to just have a secret nuclear weapon Nobody's inspecting that. They don't have to disclose any information. Like, what makes Israel so special in this equation? And what's funny is this is why all this, well, we think that it's backfiring when it comes to how the rest of the world is looking at Israel. But perhaps this is just a cost that they're willing to take. If this is what it's going to take for them to make sure that they stay in conflict with the region, with the surrounding countries, as they try to destabilize those countries and grow this greater Israel project, maybe that's just something that they're willing to take. Maybe they understand that if they're the more they're hated, they can tap into that, use it to their advantage. I don't know what it is. Play the victim card. I really don't know. But I know one thing that I do know is what I've been seeing. And it doesn't seem like, from what I've been seeing, anybody is taking Donald Trump and America serious when it comes to these ceasefires. Donald Trump said when he first came in, he would address, no new wars. He would, I'll solve Ukraine and Russia. It never would have happened. I'll make sure that I get a peace deal in a day. And before I even get in office, all this other stuff, the goalposts keep moving. The goalposts keep moving. Let me make sure that I catch up with my notes just to make sure that I'm covering everything. And Nick brought up a question. He said, or a point that he believes that Israel is pausing on fighting with Hamas to get ready for a war with Iran. I don't know how America is going to respond to this. I do not know how America is going to respond to this. I'm sure that now that I'm thinking about when Iran dropped the bomb on the U.S. air base to respond to the U.S. us dropping a bomb on their nuclear facilities, the same country, yes, Iran, the one that wants to destroy America, and they chant death to America, and they see us as the big Satan, and Israel's the little Satan. Yeah, that same country, they gave us a heads up that they were getting ready to bomb us. I'm sure Bibi Netanyahu would have rathered Iran not give the U.S. the heads up and maybe some Americans dying, because what would have happened? Then America, we rally around it. How dare you drop a bomb or, do something to our air base? And of course, you can't say you apologize. You can't say it's like the U.S. Liberty, right? Is it the USS Liberty? Hold on, let me make sure. I try not to make USS Liberty. Yeah, I don't think they can get away with saying that they just made a mistake. They flew over it a few times, saw the American flags, but they just weren't aware. I don't know what's going to happen with this entire situation. It's just, it's appalling. It's a genocide when it comes to Gaza. It just seems like we're being used. It seems like Donald Trump is allowing us to be used. Like, we don't want to participate in this. I don't want to be a part of this. Money aside, money, obviously I don't want my money supporting this, but I do not want to be a part of this. Why is Donald Trump feeling the need to put us in something that we don't need to necessarily be in? America, can we take a vote on this? Perhaps we should take a vote. Somebody, didn't some young group of kids somewhere just take over a government and do a vote on Discord? We don't have to take over a government, but can we just do a vote on Discord? Maybe somebody should poll that. Do we want to be involved? Can we just cut ties? Why are we involved? And why are we involved in the way that we're involved? If we're going to get involved, then at the very least, we can have all the parties respect us. You begging Netanyahu for a ceasefire? No, have that same energy that you have when you're talking to Hamas. Because it seems like you're getting angry at Hamas and you're taking out a lot of your frustrations with Israel and Bibi Netanyahu on Hamas, making threats to them. Oh, we told them to disarm. If they don't disarm, then we'll go in there. Okay, Trump. How about you been telling Bibi Netanyahu to stop sending missiles over there for the last 5-6 months? He hasn't listened to you once, has you looking like a fool. Why don't you express some of that energy towards him? instead of tucking in his chair. That's all I got for y'all, man. Is this how y'all feel? Is this what black fatigue feels like? I feel black fatigue as well, man. All these victims. Well, let me not get on that. But I was just making a joke. I assume it's different for somebody that's not black, but I got Israel fatigue, man. I'm like, yo, we're over it. We're over it. We're over all the victim stuff. We're waking up. We're realizing that we were indoctrinated and raised a certain way with this public school system to teach us things with a very skewed perspective and biased perspective. We weren't taught an objective history of that region as well as a bunch of others. And we're not falling for it. Like, we're not going for it. And I think, the young folk, this younger generation that Nick Fuentes has a hold on, that Charlie Kirk had a hold on, the young generation that was asking questions, that don't have that Ted Cruz mindset of we need to serve Israel and be good to Israel. No, they have that mindset of let's put country first. Let's pair country with religion. And let's prioritize America first before we start doing any and everything for another country that just seems to get us involved in all of their disputes, puts us at risk, serves who a benefit? The elites? Oh, they give us intelligence. You mean the same intelligence that they used to spy on us, Ted Cruz? According to Ted Cruz. It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. They have a stranglehold on us, and it's very frustrating, very annoying, and it's discouraging because if not Trump, then who? If Trump's caving to this, that's what the worst part about all of this is. If Trump's caving to all this, does anybody else even have a chance? I don't know. That's all I got for y'all on this one. We'll have the second part out to you shortly. I'll see y'all soon. Oh yeah, my fault. You see the fatigue setting in. Make sure y'all first and foremost, I appreciate y'all. Y'all keep rocking with me. Y'all keep rocking with the videos. Make sure y'all check out some of our live shows. We're actually doing them now live every day. It's supposed to start 8 o'clock every day, but due to scheduling, certain days may change, but tentative 8 a.m. to about 9:15-ish. Trying to bring it back to 9, 8 to 9, Monday through Friday. Make sure y'all check that out. We go through various topics, culture, politics. Most of the time it's politics. A whole lot of, this is where the fatigue is starting to set in. But yeah, appreciate y'all tapping in, continuing to rock. Make sure that you like, subscribe, turn your notifications on if you haven't already. And most importantly, leave a comment. As I always say, I have my own biases. I try to be as objective as possible. And the way that I can be objective as possible is to help y'all, or for y'all to help me stay accountable to that, because we all have biases and previous experiences that shape, our lens when it comes to what we're seeing. So I just want to make sure that I'm being as objective as I possibly can, as straightforward, genuine, and transparent. So y'all leave a comment. Let me know how I'm doing, and I'll see you on the next one.
It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.